All right, so let's put all this stuff to work. We're going to make a bow truss. So hopefully you guys know what trusses are. If not, I just pulled a few examples up. So trusses are these, they look like beams, but they have the webbing. They have a top and a bottom cord. They're made to span long distances. As you can see here, this one's spanning from one bearing wall to the next. So you have a nice big clear open area. Bow truss gets its name because the top cord is actually curved like a bow and arrow. So bow truss, here we go. Here's another example. See how these work. All right, and so with that, here's a bow truss made in Grasshopper. So here's the Grasshopper recipe. What I'm going to do is we're going to take a look at this Grasshopper recipe step by step, talk about the sort of recipe here. The next video we'll build up from scratch, and yeah. So let's start. I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to select all this stuff, and I'm going to hopefully tell it not to display. Let's see. Turn preview selected off. Okay, so what that does is Grasshopper is still doing all this stuff, but it's not previewing any of the geometry in Rhino. And so right here at the very beginning, remember we read our graphs from left to right. So on the very left, we have a few ingredients and parameters. One ingredient is a curve, right? And here it is. It's a line that I drew in Rhino. And so we're going to build a truss from a simple line. So if we thought about this for a minute, I could draw a simple line for the span of this truss, let's say from one column to the other or one wall to the other, depending on the loading situation. And what we're going to do, we're going to bring that line into Grasshopper so we can build off of it, and turn the preview on. All right, now it's green. Then what we're going to do, we're going to evaluate this curve at a t parameter. In other words, we're going to place a point along the curve. I can, of course, adjust where that t parameter sits on the curve and move that point around. Then what do? I build a line off of this point. So I'm going to build a vertical line. There's one way to build a line. It's called start point, direction, and length. And the ingredients are, no surprise, a start point, the direction for the line to move, and then the length, the amount that it moves in that direction, right? So direction, magnitude, and then that starting point, right? So I'm going to use the point that we made along this curve, and I'm referring to the z-axis, the world z-axis, and then I have a slider here for the length. I'll go ahead and turn this on. This is going to create a vertical line from the point that we made along our truss. And so that line's going to change its position if I change the position of the point, right? And then, of course, we can change its length as well, which will define the height or the sort of depth, I guess you might say, of this bow truss later on. Okay. Here, what do? I'm sampling the start and the end points for our original line, so I have those to refer to, right? And then I also am finding the start and end points for the new line that I made, this vertical line. I'll turn the preview on. You can see them highlighted in green here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a spline for our bow from this point to this point to this point, right? So I need vertices in order to draw a spline or, a curve. And so I have these lines as a sort of a scaffold, and I can find these points, and now it's like connect the dots. All right, and so I can plug those in and draw our bow. And I'm saying maybe instead of an arc, we can actually have a bow that we can manipulate based off of, some sort of geometry of the roof. There we go. So it doesn't necessarily have to be symmetrical in this case. All right, now it gets a little trickier here, but if you can see this, all I'm doing is I have two divide curve widgets here. You remember when we use divide curve, we plug in a curve, we tell it how many times we want to divide the curve, and then at each of those divisions, it populates the curve with a point. And so here's our bow. I plug it into divide curve, and I get all of these points. Right? Now you can imagine these are going to be nodes for me to start to connect with the bottom chord in order to create the webbing. And then I do the same thing here with the bottom chord. So I divide up this bad boy, and here we go. We have points. I'm going to go ahead and turn off some of this other geometry. Don't necessarily need it. I'm turning the preview off. It's still there. However, it's sort of in the way visually. And so I just want to focus on stuff. I can always right click on a widget and turn its preview on or off. So good to know, isn't it? And don't let all of this tangled web of stuff fool you, right? Let's take it one widget at a time. First, I have a list of points here, right? The division points along the bottom chord, and a list of points, division points along the top chord. And I plug them in one-to-one for a set of start points and end points to create a set of lines. Okay, so that looks pretty straightforward. So that's for the vertical webbing. Okay, and then you remember we talked about how to reorganize and shuffle around lists. There's a shift list widget here for this list of points. And so then I take this list of points and then the shifted list of points here and connect them up to create the diagonal bracing, right? So in other words, instead of connecting up one-to-one, so this one to this one and this one to this one, I've shifted one of these lists over so it connects the first point with the second point down here with a third point up here, and the third point down here with the fourth point up here, right? We've shifted this list, and we've done the same thing here for the bottom, right, to create our cross webbing. So all we've done really is just create a couple of curves, divide them, and start connecting the dots, right? And then we rearrange the order of the dots in order to create, diagonal lines as well. Last but not least, I can plug in all this line work and use the pipe tool and actually give this stuff a little bit of thickness. So in this case, I'm actually giving a radius value and then a radius value. There's something funny here. I'll show you about that in a little bit, but I've actually input this asterisk. I've actually input a custom expression. And so whatever this input is, I'm actually multiplying it by 1.5. And so we'll talk about that later in the next video. We'll do this from scratch. But I just wanted to make sure the recipe is the thing you're sort of getting here. High level conceptual idea of what we're actually trying to accomplish here. Okay, so we start with a simple line, right? That's really easy to draw. I can sit there with a framing diagram actually from Engineer and start to make trusses off of these sort of lines in plan in order to create these three-dimensional trusses. All right, and they have some variability to them. So as I said, we can change the geometry of that top chord as well as its depth, right? And we can also even change how dense this truss is going to be, right? How many divisions we have, okay? How much webbing we need. All right, so, and of course we can change the sort of thickness of when we actually give this stuff thickness here with the pipe command. So the radius of all the piping. All right, so in the next video, we'll start from scratch and build this up, and it'll be really fun, I guarantee it.